everybody, and welcome. This is a new series we're doing at Fireside Chat. My name is Tim Shaw, one of your Government Affairs Directors here at Pacific West.
I'm Christine Schachter, a Government Affairs Director as well. I thought he was going to introduce me, so I've kind of waited there for a moment.
We're not sure if we're going to call this Schachter and Shaw or Shaw and Schachter, but
Or can we just combine the name?
We're working on that.
Yeah. Well, welcome. We're here to talk specifically today about Long Beach rent stabilization. I know that you're hearing a lot going on at the state, county levels, and certainly there's a lot of that, but today we're focused specifically on Long Beach as the council there just recently approved on June 11th, which goes into effect August 1st, what they're calling tenant relocation assistance, rent stabilization, rent control. It's all the same thing in essence.
So we were there to oppose this policy that came out of the city, writing letters, meeting with council members, appearing at the council meeting, but unfortunately the city council didn't listen. So we're about to explain the details of the policy, but bottom line, it's terrible and horrible and awful, and we did our best, and we're going to hopefully get this changed in the future. But I want to give a particular shout out as we get going to council members Stacy Mungo, Daryl Supernaw, and Susie Price, who did vote no on this policy that came about. So we want to thank and encourage those three council members, and hopefully their ranks can grow on that council as we look at these housing policies. So when you have a rent stabilization, you're basically, the city government, the majority of that city council has decided it's their job to dictate the terms of the landlord-tenant relationship. It's something obviously philosophically that we would disagree with. Being an organization that believes in property rights, the owner of a property should be able to enter into an agreement with a prospective tenant, and they do that on their own. Instead, here the city government has decided to inject themselves and dictate what the terms of that relationship need to be, which is ridiculous on its face and terrible. So hopefully we get a better city council and clearer thinking out of that city council in the near future.
We sure hope so. It's interesting with 4th of July around this time that, you know, our country was founded on property rights, and here it's being eroded. But again, it's council members who think they're gonna get a little political favor by focusing on buzzwords and things that impact only a small portion of the population and their residents as well. You're really impacting a small few and hurting the large share of folks, because what you're seeing is those landlords who may take those units off the marketplace as a result, or may not do rehab, because what they're going to be forced to do is pay $4,500 to tenants, again just those all in one unit, but per unit, either if they give notice to vacate to the tenant, or they're going in to do rehab, or if you're increasing the rent over 10% in any one given year, you're basically forced to pay $4,500.
So what would trigger it if a landlord wanted to raise the rent on their tenant 10% or more in a year? If the tenant says, gee, I don't want to pay that, I can't pay that, I'm going to move out of this unit instead of pay that increase. In that case, the landlord has to pay the relocation of their tenant up to the $4,500. So that's obviously, the whole idea is that you would discourage a landlord from ever raising the rent over 10%. So the city council thinks that they're helping tenants in this case by really discouraging a landlord from ever raising their rent over 10%. So the irony to me is that in many cases, a landlord might go any number of years without raising their rent under normal circumstance. But once the government here has put that cap out there, you can practically guarantee every landlord, property owner, will raise their rent up to 9.9% a year, every year, to make sure they keep up with the market, but they're doing it just below the cap that the government had set. So while the policy they think is there to help tenants, in reality, it's going to force landlords to do that annual rent increase. And over time, they'll probably get their rent increase even more than they would have if they have just left it alone.
And you're putting the burden on landlords too. I mean, it's that the tenant, if tenant does not notify the landlord within 14 days after receipt of the rent increase, that they could be essentially given the permission for that $4,500. So you're really playing, some ways some would call it extortion, but placing the burden on the landlord who's not in the business to, take advantage of people. I think landlords get a bad rap, and unfortunately we see that at council meetings with tenants getting out there claiming certain things, and we're all in this together. It's about housing affordability for all, and we're trying housing across all income spectrums, all levels, and unfortunately it places the burden on the landlord, who is either forced to rehab the unit and it deteriorates, or increase rents to cover the cost, and you get penalized for that as a result.
Well, in the landlord-tenant relationship, the property owner, the landlord, is supplying housing. They own the house, but they're willing to let this person over here live in it. That's a great, thing they're doing, but they obviously are going to charge money for that. So there is as with any economic transaction, there's that going on. Someone's paying for something, and they're getting a service or product in return. So that's what should normally happen, and what happens on everything, right? Except in this case, the government's trying to dictate what those terms are. So, another thing we can talk about is the provisions related to just cause. So should the property owner want to ask their tenant to leave, to vacate the property, they now here can only do so under certain conditions. The tenant now has basically a right to be living in that property that they don't own, but they're just paying rent for, but they can only be asked to leave if they meet these certain conditions.
And they're considered in good standing. What they're saying is, so more than a year, and basically short of violating the law or not paying rent, you're allowed to stay in that unit, or you have to be paid $4,500. So it's quite the conundrum we're facing. Also on that note, the landlord has to notify the tenants within 30 days after this becomes effective. So effective September 1st, all landlords have to notify their tenants of their rights. You will be eligible to receive relocation payments upon expiration or termination of your tenancy under this lease. So basically you're telling the tenants you have the right to be paid by me. So we're in quite the situation, and you all should be outraged as well, because it impacts not only rentals but everything across the housing stock that we're facing.
So if you are currently a property owner in Long Beach, we need to be keeping your eyes out for that form that should be coming from the city that you're going to be required to supply to your tenant, and that will outline their tenant rights under this new ordinance. So as Christine mentioned, that's something it's due by September 1st, so very soon.
Yeah. And we'll be keeping you updated. We appreciate your engagement. We're not giving up this fight. We still have other avenues we're pursuing, and we look forward to your continued engagement as we move forward.
Yes, and including, we had a council member in Long Beach get elected to the state legislature, so we're going to have a special election for that city council seat coming up, and hopefully we can get someone elected there who believes in private property rights and recognizes the folly of these policies, and that can hopefully help stem the tide of bad housing policies in the city of Long Beach.
Great. Thank you so much for tuning in. We look forward to speaking with you next time.
We'll see you then.